This is the Lydia and Spin, episode 228, with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. Good afternoon,
Good
Timothy.
afternoon. It's kind of like, well, the two of us, sometimes together and sometimes separate, have been going, well, our whole adult lives, right? Our whole lives, but in the current stretch, basically from the end of summer till now. And then, of course, my first day off without either touring, playing a concert, or having a guest at my house. Simon and I had to drive up to Massachusetts for this Thanksgiving thing week. Yeah, last time we were discussing as we were driving through a rain and snowstorm, and how about an alternative Thanksgiving day? I mean, you have Halloween parties the days before, you have Christmas parties all around it. Like, why do I have to collectively celebrate this fucking thing on the same day as everyone else? I mean, the commute is such a fucking pain in the ass.
Well,
It
no,
just,
you made that choice. You know what? I'm commuting from my computer to my bed, and I'm very thankful for that. Thank you.
well, you made that choice, and you made the right choice, maybe.
Well, I
Um,
did make the right choice, and I'm very happy with it.
all right. Well, so yeah, the commute yesterday was a little dangerous. It took us 7 hours. It was a little dangerous, but
That's
we made it.
ridiculous. Oh my
Yes,
God.
yes.
Well, there was
Um,
a storm. It's everywhere. It's bizarre because it always seems like there's a big storm right during Thanksgiving travel or Christmas travel, which is a better reason to not go anywhere at that point,
yes, yes,
as if travel wasn't horrendous enough. Well, and speaking of travel, I just saw an article today that said the richest 1% generate as much carbon emissions as the
yes.
poorest two-thirds.
No, I know
Oh,
all about this. Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio with all your, la la, and then your private jettery. I mean, this is just absolutely unbelievable.
Well,
The richest 1%.
well, a carbon footprint for a house, for instance, is pretty large. So when you have 8 houses, it just starts adding up after a while. I mean, the carbon footprint for having a lot of things is, I mean, it makes total sense. And of course, those houses, in order for the pipes not to freeze, so you have the energy going all the time. Or if you're in a hot area, you have the AC going all the time. It's
Well, the climate
yeah,
conference will be November 30th to December 12th in Dubai, which I'm sure uses an incredible amount of energy to keep
absolutely.
all the buildings air conditioned.
Is that
So,
like
I
a
mean,
punchline to
obviously,
do it
climate
there?
change is it's worsening the inequality both between and within. I mean, countries. It's just. I mean, when you break it down to that statistic, you can just say, well, you know what? The rich are not going to stop their horrendous, greedy, gluttonous ways, and the rest of us will just have to suffer, and
Right.
that's the
Well,
way it is.
it's gaslighting, just like recycling was gaslighting, as if the consumer is to blame, not the person that set the stage. And you can say, you talk about the 1%, but you also talk about the globe, and this is part of why India, the growing middle class in India and China, when we tell them, hey, take it easy with your shit, they're like, well, fuck you, you invented this shit, and now you're telling us now. But they do, but we all do have to do our part. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but yeah, that's a tough one.
I mean,
Yeah.
is it too late? I mean, it might possibly be, but that doesn't mean we just give up all hope who are already here. But speaking of having a terrifying statistic, so a report just came out about the safest countries in the world. Do you want to guess where the safest top three are? And then I'll tell you what number America is.
I mean,
And
I mean, that's a
yes.
that's probably like, I mean, is that fair? I mean, Liechtenstein, for instance. Are you talking about like bigger countries or like these like little
I'm talking
village?
about out of 100, and let me see, it goes into about 163 countries. So, what is the safest countries you can think of right
Okay, I'm gonna say things, but it's also a loaded question. Well, New Zealand, maybe, I don't know.
now?
Is
Yeah,
that
New
up
Zealand
there?
is number four. Number four.
Um, you know, well, I mean, Luxembourg.
It would be safe if there wasn't a tremendously humongous volcano
Well,
about
well, well. I
ice.
mean, Iceland. Interesting. I mean, Japan, considering the population size, I bet you it's
Japan
pretty
is number
healthy.
9.
Okay. I mean, and what do you mean by say by other people or just by anything? Like,
Just in general. In general. How about
all right.
Denmark?
Well,
Here's the number 3
Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland is
Number
probably
three, you would not imagine, but considering the history of its violence, go ahead. Yeah.
Canada.
Ireland, number three.
Oh, you know,
Canada's
Canada's what?
number 11.
So I'm actually hitting a
But
lot of
you're
the time.
right. Japan, Switzerland. How about Slovenia? Slovenia, Portugal, Singapore,
Well,
not Austria.
Singapore makes sense. Slovenia, that's interesting. Okay, that makes sense. I'm
It
considering
is.
how violent the Balkans are. It was always the kind of the safe one.
Well, Croatia is number 14.
That's very impressive. Now,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Hungary is number 18.
So let's go to the bottom of the list.
Yeah, let's go to the bottom. All right, let's start at the bottom because you know where America is?
Oh, it's probably on the last third, the beginning of the last third.
131.
Out of
Haiti is safer than the United States of America.
What?
The places more dangerous: Brazil, Palestine, Lebanon, Mexico, Libya, Nigeria. No, Niger.
Well, I mean, what about Venezuela? Yeah, exactly. That's going to be through the roof.
Colombia,
Mexico,
Israel,
Mexico,
Nigeria, Mexico, Iran, North Korea, Ethiopia, Central African Republic, Iraq, Sudan, Somalia, Ukraine. We're in good company. Russia, 158.
Yeah.
South Sudan, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan. Yeah. Okay. So we are in the bottom third, as you guessed.
Sure. And safety, I'd have to read more about how they define that. I mean, bad healthcare and poverty. I mean,
basically the general quality of life and the possibility of having an unnecessary death.
Well, and you're wondering why some of these cities, the more successful cities in the country, are turning into giant gated communities. And you're wondering why there's private security everywhere. Because
this study was done by the Global Peace Index and produced by the Institute for Economics and Peace. And it covers 99.7% of the population. And it measures societal safety and security, domestic and international conflicts, and the degree of militarism. So that's what we're dealing with. America, 131, behind South Africa and Haiti.
But the Americas minus Canada, it's really the blood is we're pretty bloodthirsty continents here. I mean, they're really insane. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Venezuela.
Well, Europe is home to 7 of the 10 most peaceful countries, which of course, I mean, we know.
Yes. Yes.
But anyway, I feel safe no matter where I go. But maybe that's just because I don't fear death.
Well, one person who I guess you would come to the conclusion that doesn't feel safe is Daryl Hall from John Oates, who just filed a restraining order against him, and he got it. I guess there's some big confidential legal battle. I must be over publishing or but it escalated to the point where he got an actual restraining order filed in Nashville, Tennessee. I don't know what the fuck John Oates
did
to Daryl Hall, but
I know that their music makes me feel very violent, so they should be more afraid of me listening to their music.
I told you the first pop rock concert I saw at age 7, my aunt took me. Hall & Oates at the Wisconsin State Fair in Milwaukee. But that's a whole other story.
They never were of any interest to me whatsoever. Well, I mean, speaking about not feeling safe, now imagine if you were a female bat. I'm just saying.
I don't even know how to imagine that, but go ahead.
I'm thinking about this because I saw Sebastian Greppo did a great supporter, did an incredible video of beautiful fruit bats dancing to Fields of Fire, and I saw it recently. But so anyway,
fruit bats are huge. Those are big ones. Yeah.
Secret sex lives of bats. Study reveals how males have penises 7 times longer than their partner's vaginas and use them as an arm during romps that can last up to 12 hours. Ouch.
Wow.
And also, not only are their penises 7 times as long, they have a heart-shaped head, which makes it very difficult to engage in anything. And very little is known about how bats have sex because previous research have shown that bat species, one of the things they do is they emit, like we all do, a peculiar perfume to find mates. But anyway, they're trying to figure this out at the University of Lausanne, Department of Ecology and Evolution. The first known example of non-penetrative sex in a mammal, they claim. So they must
Whoa.
just be rubbing up against and squirting all over the place.
Right. I did not know that. So they don't penetrate. What? But then they.
Well, I mean,
I,
look, not
oh,
not
oh,
really.
you know what? It's interesting because if they use it like an arm, I mean, that's what an octopus
Yeah,
does. I've talked about it. Like an octopus
yeah.
will curl. The male will curl up one of his tentacles, like a cinnamon roll kind of looking thing, and then kind of beat off until there's like this little, well, cinnamon frosting kind of thing in the center. It's sperm, and then uncoils it into the one hole I think an octopus has, and then as soon as that happens, they both swim as hard as they can away from each other. Like it's done. They want nothing else to do with each other.
Yeah, I mean, the male bat would just grab the female by biting her neck and moving their pelvis, fully erect penis in a probing fashion, and they're just making contact around the area. But then there's the wrinkle-faced bats, and they lower a fold of skin under their chin before sex. I guess that makes them more attractive. Anyway, I'm just saying, I do not want to ever encounter, bat or not, a penis 7 times longer than my own
All right.
vagina.
Well,
there is something I finally fear. So true.
Just speaking of flying things, do you remember? I think we might have mentioned in one of the stories about this Eurasian eagle owl that escaped the Central Park Zoo about 9 months ago. I think we mentioned this. Well, that it's a giant kind of grand owl, and it's named Flacco. Now, some teenagers fucking cut a hole in the cage, and the thing escaped. Now, the problem was Flacco has only lived in captivity, so they don't really, the chances the thing can make it is slim. But as they say about New York City, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And Flacco has been spotted, and there's been photographs. 9 months later, and it's doing well. It's plenty of rodents in the city, plenty of fucking things for that thing to hunt. It was spotted also in the East Village. So Flacco is doing very well in the concrete jungle of New York City, and the pictures are pretty amazing of this thing. It's really giant and huge. Yes.
Now, I was recently there, but I didn't have a chance because I was only there for one day to go to this great new museum that opened in Barcelona, and it's censored art from around the world finds a second opportunity at a Barcelona museum for banned art. So there's a drawing of a nude Donald Trump. Who wants to see that? A punching bag sculpture shaped like a torso, a display of women's party shoes standing proudly on prayer rugs. So various pieces of contemporary art that have been banned in other places are now at the Barcelona's Museum of Forbidden Art, or the Museum de l'Art prohibited, and it has over 200 works, including things by Robert Mapplethorpe and Picasso.
Cool.
And this sounds very interesting. Anyway, I can't wait to return and see what else. Perhaps I can contribute something to it, like just my entire life story.
Is there any art you want to ban, even if you hate it? The whole concept of just banning art. I mean, it's
no,
of course not.
Once I got started, it would be a slash and burn rodeo. So I think I'll just hold my tongue. No. Whatever you like it. Go ahead, enjoy. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, not much more to report right now.
Sure.
You gotta go prepare the turkey.
Yeah, you gotta just do all this stuff. Yeah, exactly. Anyhow, well,
I'm most thankful for knowing you, Timothy Dahl, and
likewise.
Simon Slater, and everybody
else.
Who's been
last week was a good homecoming. I had 5 performances last week, 2 with you, and we had friends around. Mike Hoffman was around, and I was very happy to be in everyone's presence, and very happy to be performing as much as I did, and just grateful in general. So that's my Thanksgiving. I'm very grateful and thankful.
I want to thank you for letting me be myself as always, and that's what we do here at the Lydian Spin. We let people be themselves. All right, that's it. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Ric Royer, who has a new book called Niagara Falls, New York, which was put out by a friend of the podcast. I believe, did Jeff Schneider put this out?
Yeah.
From Arab on Radar, who's been releasing some pretty interesting books as of late. I have to say, I've been really enjoying it, having grown up in Rochester, New York, and written about Love Canal. But what's bizarre is today, of all days, there was some kind of action on the Rainbow Bridge between America and Canada. Is this a prediction of that your book is going to take off wildly?
Yeah, I guess so. Or it's going to bomb.
No, nice pun, man.
Nobody knows what happened yet. Maybe we will.
No,
eventually.
I know. The Rainbow Bridge walk is about what it takes if you get through customs quickly. It's about all these about like a half hour, 40 minutes.
Yeah. So you're familiar with the area, Tim?
I mean, not like you are, but yeah. I
Okay,
have
good.
to go there. Yeah.
Good.
I've had to cross that border on several occasions and
Yeah.
kind of check it out. And of course, the classic line is the Canadian side is so much nicer than the American side, and maybe that's true. But I mean, the American side is definitely rougher.
Yeah, they both have their pros and cons.
Yeah, let's start with this, and then I can't wait to get into your book. Here you read some of it and talk some more about our communal kind of place that we grew up. First of all, we have a lot of friends in common, which, I mean, I only met you a few months ago. I think it was in Woodstock when Keckler and I were playing at the Tinker Cinema. Was that when we met?
Tinker Street Cinema, yeah.
And then we met recently. You were just last week at the second to last Retrovirus show in Catskill at the Avalon Lounge. Both of the shows put on by Tommy Grenis, good friend of ours, and Smoke in the Shadow, and also who wrote the theme song to the podcast. And we met again, and then I saw you flirting with Kevin Shea.
Yeah. It's funny that we've only met recently because we've sort of been hanging out in the same circles for quite a while with Joseph Keckler and Weasel and Kevin and Admiral Gray. She's a neighbor up here.
Well, now that we've met, we won't be able to separate ourselves. I really love the book. I find it hilarious and horrifying, which I think is the best combination of anything. I love the facts in it. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about it? First of all, you were born in Niagara Falls. And for those that don't know, the first Superfund site, which means do not live here, toxic waste dump, every kind of forever chemical you can think of was dumped really in your backyard and not far from my backyard.
Yeah, it's kind of like Love Canal is kind of like a poltergeist for toxic waste, where all these chemicals were buried in barrels under the ground, and then a neighborhood and school was built on them, and then the toxic fumes entered the homes and all that. So
well, and also Hooker Chemical Company was there, but it was, debris from the Manhattan Project, from Bethlehem Steel, from numerous. So your book is kind of a travel log of going back to your home base to see the horrible family. Most families are at this time of the year, Thanksgiving. I have to say, I'm really thankful that I don't have a family to go back to. So anybody that doesn't or isn't going back to their family should feel lucky. They are not alone, even if they are alone. I'm enjoying myself. But it's a travelogue of going back to investigate, actually, the guy that had this utopian dream to build this, incredible city, which then turned into the #1 Superfund site.
Yeah, that particular part of the story was what interested me, and I didn't know about the backstory, the history of the actual canal, because I'm a bit of a Niagara Falls a file, and I was just reading about Love Canal. There was a new book that came out like 2 years ago or so. I just got curious about what the canal was doing there in the first place, because it wasn't really a canal. It's like 100-foot ditch with no water in it. Not a really great canal.
Right.
That used chemical waste in. And why was it called Love? So I looked into that. Ironically, totally fueled by hydropower, clean energy.
Oh, interesting.
And he wanted to build a canal from the Niagara River to essentially power it with hydropower, because this was before alternating current. But he ran out of money. His dreams were like too wild. and he just only got to building 100 feet of it. And his name, he wanted to build this utopia, this environmentally friendly one, and his name gets associated with the worst environmental disaster in our country.
Well, yes, that's sometimes it lands like that. It's
One of my favorite lines was, and correct me if I'm misquoting, nothing is as easy as being depressed in Niagara, a city that jumped over itself. That's a really great.
well, I mean, I was going to maybe bring this up later, but supposedly, Mike Hoffman, who was visiting us this past week, his boyfriend dragged him to see, I don't know, Fast and the Furious 11 or some stupid shit like that. The final scene supposedly is them in some race where their cars are launching off of Niagara Falls. One of the, let's be really, really dumb, but since you're a Niagara Falls file, maybe it'd be worth seeing just for that scene. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll suffer through it just to get to the ending, I guess.
You know,
I'm a completist, you know.
I think it was the year of or the year after I left Rochester for good was the year, I believe it was two young journalists that started investigating what exactly was going on in that area and dug through the remains because there was so much cancer and birth defects. So, I mean, so much death and cancer in my own family, brain cancers, all kinds of cancers. And I think it was the year that I left, or the year after I left, that actually two young journalists started digging through the rubble, and that became the first Superfund site. So it was so incredibly toxic. I mean, one of the wonders of the world, whether it is or not, it's so incredible, Niagara Falls, and then just don't go there. And certainly don't.
So Rick, how many times did they stop Niagara Falls from breaching the rim? Because I've seen those pictures where they've actually plugged it up and you see all the shit that's underneath. How many times did that happen?
Yeah, only once man-made. There was one time that it stopped because of a ice flow that was
right.
like
That was
a long time
incredible.
ago. But they only stopped it once on purpose in the 1950s. And it's interesting, they stopped it. They spent all this money to stop it because they were afraid that that there would be a lot of rock falls, at the rim, and they wanted to support it. And then once they stopped it, they realized that all the rocks that had built on the bottom were actually supporting it. So they stopped it for nothing. They spent all this time, effort, and money, and they're like, "Oh, actually, it's fine."
But what a spectacle! What a spectacle! I mean, those pictures are pretty amazing. I mean, cars, there's a bunch of shit that was down there, right? I mean,
probably a lot of bones. I don't know.
I mean, and when did this whole trend of crazy maniacs taking a barrel over it, when did that start, and why did that start?
Oh, actually, the first person that go over was actually a woman, Annie Taylor.
Okay.
She was, I guess what you would call back in those times an old maid, and she was poor, and she wanted to do it for money, and she survived. She survived in this like little wooden barrel that you would see like it nowadays. The only place you see him is like a cidery or a distillery.
How much did she make? How much did she make? $10?
Yeah, she so it was a little bit more carnivalesque by the falls back then, and there was all these people selling trinkets and stuff, and
What
she
year?
would just
What
sit
year,
there.
Rick?
Oh, this must have been 1880s. Yeah.
So and in the 1880s, if you had things like compound fractures and stuff, it's different results, and there's a different infrastructure to help you. I mean, when you say she survived, what did that really mean? I mean, was she just kind of like unscratched and like, I did it?
Yeah, there's drawings, I think, maybe even a photograph. She just looks like she's got one trickle of blood. And there's one person I talk about in the book who tried to kill himself. There's only two people that jumped over and survived. One was a 12-year-old kid who went over with a boat capsized. Another was a guy who wanted to kill himself, and he survived. And then like 10 years later, he had all this fame, so he wanted to do it again, this time in a like a bubble, and he died. So,
I wish more people who sought fame unnecessarily would just bubble and die.
Bubble and die.
So the boat that the kid. So three people survived. You're saying it was basically it's the first person, Anne. You said I didn't get her name.
I meant the two people survived going over with nothing, just their body.
Just their body. So
Yeah.
It is tempting. It is kind of tempting.
Oh, of course.
Just take a swan dive in. I mean,
anytime you're at that, anytime you're at the brink and look, especially on the American side, you can get really close. There's some weird allure.
I absolutely agree.
That's what so it must be the pile of rocks that kills them, I would assume. Yeah, you
of course, its own nature is just, monumental. It's just absolutely tremendous. Why don't you read us a passage now, Rick?
Sure. I should say that this is going to sound like, so far when we're talking, it sounds like a history book, and that was my intention when I started writing this.
There's a lot more. There's a lot more in there. There's some hallucinatory passages, abstractions, philosophy. It's more than a history lesson.
Yeah, I couldn't help but writing a lot more than a history lesson because the place is just so weird. So I'm going to start with a passage. In the beginning of this passage has a quote from one of the first Western explorers to see Niagara Falls, the waterfall, and that line is, "On whatever side you turn your eyes, you discover nothing which does not inspire a secret horror." Niagara Falls has always felt spooky to me, mostly in a good way, a thrill of bizarre, but sometimes in a way that provokes pure existential dread. Niagara's deepest creepiness comes not from what you see, but from what you don't see. Sure, it has its share of decaying, decimated buildings, but the eeriness that counts comes from the absence of them. Empty stretches with signs that there once was something there, burned-in shadows in the form of foundations without walls, weeds growing in cracks, overgrown fields too toxic to build on, those parking lots facing a whole lot of nothing. Nothing does nothing, quite like Niagara Falls. From an overhead view, the city looks patchy, blotted out, its accidental modern art made of what was erased in the minimalist rot of what's left. It's a map of muted simplicity, a memory warping over time, sun-bleached blocks of painted over graffiti faded into the concrete, leaving barely a trace of what was there, only the lightly demarcated outlines of something that was, a vagueness accompanied by the sounds of your breathing. I was recording all of these thoughts into my phone when I stopped and kneeled down to try to get a good photo of a bowling ball in the grass. An inscription read, "Gold." Maybe the brand, maybe the name of the bowler, I didn't know. It was hard to capture the feeling of that bowling ball, the mystery of how it may have arrived there, how lonely and absurd it looked. The waterfalls themselves, you can't take a bad picture of them, but the essence of everything else that defines Niagara Falls feels impossible to photograph. The bowling ball rolled around in my head all day. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Sometimes the big mysteries of life come dressed as death, the water, the woods, and other times as bowling balls, Rice Krispie treats, or burnt spiders. Now, the Rice Krispie treats and burnt spiders are, of course, referenced earlier. So if you're dying to know what happens, it's pigroastpublishing.com.
It's really beautifully written in parts, and then I also like that there's folly in there, and there's gruesomeness. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I mean, you just gave it to me the other day. I don't usually do this much research with such little time, but I'm really enjoying it, I must say. So congratulations
really
on that. Are you going to be doing any live readings for it?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you liked it too, because I'm realizing that a lot of my other work, I don't care if people like it or not, but there's something about this book that feels so me that I feel more sensitive if people don't like it.
I understand what you're saying.
But yeah, I'm doing readings for it. I as you probably are aware from my friends, Admiral Joseph, Kevin, I have a performance background, so it's important for me to do readings or some performative. When I do readings, I don't just open the book and read from it. It makes me think of that Andy Kaufman sketch where he just goes on stage and reads The Great Gatsby until everyone boos and leaves. So I want to do something more performative. This will have like a slideshow and probably some sound and stuff.
Well, that's great because in the
Yeah.
past you have done performances that involved abstract psychoambient music
Yeah, and
various times.
yeah, absolutely. And
Under
as
what
Kevin,
name was that? I mean, when was that period? Where were you doing that? So let's just talk about first. You left Niagara Falls. Now you're in Catskill. But when
yeah.
did you finally realize you better get the fuck out of Niagara Falls?
It
I mean,
was
I know
it
you
was
know that
young.
early on. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
I was young. I think I was 19, and I moved to the big city of Buffalo, New York.
Ah,
Um, which when you're
which you can see from Niagara Falls. It's right there.
yeah, but when you
Which
grow
I
up in
would often
Niagara
run away to
Falls,
in the middle of the night.
when you're Niagara Falls, you think it's like the big city, you know. I barely even went there growing up. So when I went to Buffalo, I felt like I was really moving out, but I was
Well,
like
there's a lot
a
of
half an hour
writers
from
in
home.
Buffalo because, again, a lot depressed situations usually, you know,
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of
there was,
existential
especially
angst.
when I was there. When I was there, it was like Robert Creeley was there and Charles Bernstein, Susan Howe. So yeah, it was a
Charles
lot
Bernstein. Yeah.
different. It was very close to Niagara Falls, but it was culturally incredibly different. Once I started going to
Well,
college.
yeah, just repeating that. I mean, Buffalo actually has a lot of culture. Also, new music, like serious through composed, like modern classical. There's a whole history of education there. June in Buffalo Festival, all that stuff. So yeah,
Right, right.
there are things to definitely grab
My first
onto.
my first performance was in Buffalo at an acid party when I was 14.
Oh, I'm aware.
I was wondering how long were you in Rochester? Like when did you leave Rochester?
Well, I started running away at 13 to New York.
Okay.
And then I had went back and got some money, and then I left at 16. But in the interim, and there's so many good concerts in Rochester and Buffalo. Sometimes I just like see ya, get on the bus and go to Buffalo.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved it in Buffalo. And yeah, I as much as might sound critical of Niagara Falls, I actually love Niagara Falls too. Maybe in a way that it's because it's like weird and depressed, and I'm weird and often depressed. So I go there and feel like we understand each other. Um, but I do go there a lot and find a lot of like wonder and mystery about the place. And especially when you're at the waterfall, it's like
Yeah.
you can go through the rest of the falls and feel creeped out or disgusted or something. But once you get to the waterfall, it like literally washes that away. And you're just like, holy, oh, can I swear on this show? Or is this like
Yes, of course you
Oh,
can.
God, please.
I was like, I didn't know
Absolutely.
if I was on Jimmy Fallon or something. Yeah, it just washes it all away, and it's literally breathtaking to
Well,
be.
it is. It's surrounded by a toxic ghost town. I mean, it's a ghost town. A lot of it
Yeah, I just
because
felt
they
like it
can't put
was.
anything over. They can't put anything over, vast patches of it because it's just so corrosive
Yeah, it's going to be like that for quite some time.
forever. Yeah, yeah,
And I
forever.
felt like the whole city is just ripe for literature because those kinds of contrasts, natural wonder, toxic waste,
Yeah.
honeymoon capital, suicide capital.
The film Niagara with
Right.
Marilyn Monroe and Joseph Cotton, a great film. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it hasn't Vegas surpassed Niagara Falls for the honeymoon slash suicide capital? That's
I
another
don't know if that's
honey. Yeah.
suicide so much, but
Well,
just
well,
the fact that
definitely
they're.
suicide in Vegas. There's a lot.
I mean,
Oh no, I
honeymoon
mean, I don't
suicide
think
is
Oh,
it's.
great,
I don't
great
think it's
concept.
surpassed Niagara Falls. People will
okay.
go to Niagara Falls they'll drive from different parts of the country just to kill themselves in the falls.
Sure, sure.
I
Yeah,
think
I
they're.
mean Vegas there doesn't really matter. So the another kind of, I don't know, suicide, but it was definitely kind of killed themselves over time. Pop figure from Niagara Falls, and of course you must know this. Vanity from Vanity Six, the one that Prince produced. She's from
Yeah,
Niagara Falls, and yeah, her life was a kind of a tragedy. I mean, megastar, and then kind of discovered Jesus, and then discovered crack, and then it just went all down the
Uh,
tubes.
Rick,
But
is there a lot of cancer, brain damage, brain cancer, birth defects in your family, or
not in my family, fortunately, but if when you live in the falls, you know someone who has. I
yeah?
mean, just last year I lost a friend at 45 of cancer, and it's it's not hard to connect the dots between the the mismanagement of toxic waste in the area and their high cancer rates.
Yeah.
It's not brain science
Three
to figure that
cousins who
out.
died of brain cancer. Yeah, I have so, and that's just the start of it. So yeah. Wait, so all right, you went to Buffalo. What'd you do there?
Oh,
Tried to go to school?
yeah, I was like a theater person. Then I found poetry, because of Robert Creeley, and I studied with Robert Creeley, and that was amazing. So that's when I kind of became more of a or added writing to what I was interested in. Oh, my light just went out. I'm totally in the dark here, sorry.
You look great.
um and yeah, I was there for a while, and
If your light was plugged into the falls, we'd have like hydropower.
yeah,
You'd be like as
exactly.
white
I
as
just
I
got to
am.
get closer to the falls.
You look like a serial killer in a cabin right now.
Isn't it funny how the light is actually flashing? It's not completely dead. Look at that.
I'm
This is
really
this is
writing my own horror story with you
this
starring
is
in it right now.
this is
So I
very
mean,
eerie. Yeah, that'll be
boom.
even better.
That's even yeah.
So, anyways, I lived in Buffalo for only about 5 years, but it really gets in you fast. I think you only have to live there a couple years to feel like a Buffalonian. And once you leave the Western New York, it doesn't matter. Like, you're a Buffalo. If you say I'm from Niagara Falls, you're like, oh, you're a Buffalonian. There's something, that sort of difference collapses. It's all the same to a lot of people. So I feel like a Niagara Fallsian and a Buffalonian, and I love going back to both those places. I don't know. I love
So
Buffalo
then you
and Niagara
tramped
Falls.
your way down to New York City, obviously, for a while, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Were you living in New York or were you just performing in New York? What
No, I was
happened down
living in New
Buffalo?
York for a period, in Providence and Baltimore. Went around to a lot of places.
For a person and a writer, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, just with your sack over your shoulder.
Your
Um,
moped.
yeah, and yeah, I started. I mean, I still perform a lot, and I still perform with as sort of a music thing with the artist G. Lucas Crane. He moved up here. A lot of New York people moved upstate either before COVID or during COVID.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying it up there? 'Cause you are in the woods, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm like way more remote than a lot of people, and this is like maybe I think the third year of being this remote, like in the mountains, and I guess it's starting to lose its luster a little bit,
I mean,
especially in the winter,
are you, can I ask you roughly what's the closest town or village or what you're technically in?
Technically, I'm in a place called Acra. It's very near Wyndham, which is a lot of skiing. So it's high
Okay, right.
elevation. We actually have snow today. I'm sure it didn't snow in New York,
Wow.
right?
No, it
Oh,
didn't.
hold on. But Simon and I, the producer, we had to drive up to visit our families in Massachusetts. I was like, well, last night I guess let's do it. Well, of course, between Hartford and Worcester, Massachusetts, because you're off the coast enough and you're a little higher up, full on snow.
Oh, okay.
It took us over 7 hours gripping that fucking steering wheel. So, well, yes, we felt it. But
How
where
long did
you
it take you to, how long did it take you to get?
7
Oh
hours.
my God.
So, but you, but being near that Wyndham's like a ski resort there, so you must get a lot of fucking snow.
Yeah, we it's a little too much. I love snow, and I'm still saying I'm from Buffalo, and I'm saying
Exactly,
it's too
Buffalo
much.
gets the most. Come on.
Well, the thing about Buffalo is that it's fun, and you're in it. Like, we're so remote that if I get snowed in, I might have to eat my arm. And I have a well and septic tank, and my water is connected to a electric, so the electric goes. It could get ugly if I get snowed in up here. So,
It can get tiresome. But don't you find it weird? Like, I don't know what year you were an adolescent or teenager, but the way that it would snow in Rochester and Buffalo, when I was a kid, there'd be 6 foot snow drifts. And then that stopped for a while. And then it started up again. It would be like a few years of, really
mm-hmm.
abominable snow. And then not so much. And now it seems to be on the upswing again. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, they had that terrible blizzard where a bunch of people died last year.
Yeah, it was insane.
50 people or something. Oh.
All right, so isolation had its appeal for a while, but I mean, would you consider yourself a social person, an antisocial person? What you're saying?
Semi-social.
If it's losing its appeal, I mean, So listen, I mean, you lived in cities. You lived in Buffalo, Providence,
Yeah.
New York City, Baltimore, and now you're
Yeah.
in the mountains and the woods. Is there a sweet spot, or you just kind of go with the flow, what you're feeling at the moment?
I think we're Goldilocksing it a little bit towards, a town at least. You know what I mean? Because
I understand. I'm a
of course,
nomad.
doesn't
Yeah.
it sound like a writer's like dream, like out in the woods, is sort of a cabin?
But is it?
Yeah, is it turning into the movie Misery right now? Is that what's going on?
Well, wherever you are, after a period of time, it becomes home, and you still want to leave home, even if it looks like a resort or a getaway to anyone else. To me, I
I'm
would just
with
want to leave
you.
home.
Yeah, I'm itchy all the time. I have a great apartment. I'm like, where next?
Well, I mean, Lydia we all just did tons of months. And I mean, both Lydia and I were talking the other day. We're like, wow, we don't have anything for a few months. We can just relax. And already I'm like, huh?
Yeah, and then I was planning short trips without any gigging. Like, well, Tim, we need to go and look at this. We need to go there. How about if we go over there? I'm like, without even any gigs because there's no place to do any
No,
gigs.
we're talking about we're talking about going to the Jersey Shore off season.
Staten Island, which I've never really been
Oh yeah,
to. I
we're
mean,
gonna do
just
Staten
anywhere.
Island.
Oh yeah.
Anywhere. Just like Tim, we're gonna have to
I don't know
move.
if you're going to be able to get tickets to Staten Island this time of year. It's
Staten Island. There's more to it than people realize.
Well,
people
I'm
shit on it. There's
definitely
more to it than people realize.
I'm definitely coming up to Woodstock, Catskill area to make a 7-minute visual, like a narrative visual poem in the dead woods where you don't know whether the narrator is the killer or the cop with Jasmine Hurst. That's our next project, like a little mini horror film. So just because, because that's what we do. We might chew our own arms off even if we have food, if there's nothing else to do.
Well,
so.
Friday the 13th, I mean, that area of New York is a backdrop for a lot of horror movies and the whole sleepaway camp gone bad, But,
yeah. Lydia, you've been coming up here quite a bit. What do you have like people that are
I've been looking for your cabin in the woods, and I will find it. No, it's Tommy Grenis, who I did an album Smoke in the Shadows with when we both lived in LA, who's been pulling me up there. But also Bibby Hansen is up there. Who,
she's got a bunch of friends up there.
Yeah,
she's in Hudson, and there's I've got some friends up there. But I also I really like performing at places like the Avalon, the Tinker Cinema. That was great. And I plan on stalking around the woods in the winter. So I'll bring my shovel. By the way, I love the picture on your website, which is you with a shovel at night. I have to say that was very impressive to me. I'm like,
yeah, that was during that. Kevin Shea was mentioning it to you the other day of this act I used to do called the Coincidental Hour, which was pretty physical and violent. Never violent to an audience, but the audience violent to me. So
oh yeah.
That was the one
yeah, go ahead.
That was the one where I would often tape wax $20 bills to my chest hair, and if the audience wanted the $20 bills, they'd have to take a little souvenir with them.
When you do a hondo and you put it on your pubes, I'll be there.
Oh God.
Oh God, what?
All right.
I'm not against manscaping or mansplaining or manspreading. I think it's time for another story, Rick, at this point. How about it?
But real quickly, I want to know, did you have these perfectly symmetrical kind of rectangle wax jobs when people ripped them off, like across your chest hair?
I did, and there was, it felt a lot worse for like the 2 weeks afterwards as it was growing in than it did when it was ripped off. There was an adrenaline rush when it was ripped off, but like the itchiness of it coming in.
It's a 1 second ouch, but
yeah.
I almost misheard you say, did you have a perfectly symmetrical rectum, which would have been just phenomenal.
Was that you?
I hear what I like. Anyway, with that in mind, how about a little bit more Niagara Falls, New York by Ric Royer?
Absolutely.
Entertain me.
I left the former place of refuge wondering what was wrong with Niagara Falls. How did it go from a city that inspired utopian fantasies to one mired in a dystopian toxic reality? I don't think there's one moment you could point to that led to its downfall. It's more the result of cumulative failures. Although much of it had to start with the industrial boom of the late 19th century creating a surplus of waste, the eventual collapse of that industry ensured there would be no legacy of prosperity from its ugly and harmful imposition on the natural landscape. The excess of waste would, of course, lead to the Love Canal disaster and other issues with land use. Nothing poisons tourism quite like poison. At one point, over 250 manufacturing plants, factories, mills, and power plants lined the banks of Niagara River, upstream, downstream, unregulated, clogging a very small area of the peninsula and marring the tourist appeal of the falls with the blight of pollution. But there are other follies along the way, including gross resource management, quasi-mafia local politics, shady deals that led to tax evasion convictions. Then there are the city planners who couldn't shake the utopian spell that the city casts, leading to the debacles like the 1965 master plan, which gutted the tourist quarter, narrowing wide streets and walkways to make room for a mall, offices, and a ton of parking lots, which clogged downtown for anyone coming in from any other part of the city. Without any residential component, the plan, like others before it, further separated the local residents from the natural resources of their own city. It was an immediate flop, resulting in nearly 200 acres of vacant land in the heart of downtown. If you compare overhead maps from, say, 1970 to 2010, you'll see there were some buildings that were torn down, leaving the parking lots on either side, which helps give the city that mysterious endless parking lot feeling. One structure that survived the master plan is a gigantic building shaped like a turtle, a former Native American museum and cultural center, which went under in 1995 and has been sitting there rotting ever since. It's too expensive to demolish, and nobody wants it. What business other than a Native American museum is going to need a building shaped like a huge turtle? Like the turtle, there are plenty of other abandoned businesses that sound like they would have been tons of fun, like the Flash Cube, Fall Street Fair, House of Fantasy, and Daredevil Museum. They all stand shuttered, on display as a public punishment for poorly planned wonderlands. Oh, the fun we could have had.
Dismal.
All right.
Really dismal. I mean,
Yeah, it's dismal, but I have to go back to thinking that I actually do like it. And it's not just because I relate to its depressiveness or whatever. It's also because once I spent a lot of time there, especially alone, I started feeling really bad for the land itself, like what Niagara Falls is. Because Niagara Falls didn't do it to itself when you think of its land. It actually has some amazing, it was gifted at the outset with some amazing natural resources and a natural wonder, but it was people that did it to the land. The land didn't do it to the people. So I started to sympathize with the area as well. It had so much promise.
It's what's interesting because the East was so industrialized, and that's why so many of those national parks in the West are there, because they hadn't been industrialized. And so when Teddy Roosevelt created that whole system, although even like Muir in California, like Yosemite, that was like, even though there wasn't industry there, that was like people were like setting up fireworks and just like littering like crazy. I mean, they were, those Western national parks were kind of things they're on the tipping scale. Like, where is this going to fucking go? But it's interesting you say that, Karen, about the land, because it was, but by the time that something like that, like a national park system was even conceived, it was kind of too late. It's kind of, you got me thinking, is what I'm saying.
Definitely. And just for that anecdote, the Niagara Falls, the park around the American Falls, is the oldest national state park.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, Victoria Falls in Africa, I mean, I don't, as far as I know, that's not like a big industrial dump zone.
No.
When I think about the great falls around the world,
they were literally, in the 19th century, they were building factories along the gorge, like along the drop,
right?
Because it was important to be close to the source of power back then. So they were building factories right up against the actual waterfall.
Sure.
And diverting some of the waterfall to run, mills and things. So it was quite a different site.
And speaking of canals, so the dredging of the Erie Canal and just which was one of the major. I think they claim it's the step to what made New York City ultimately New York City, because it was competing with Chicago. And I'm just wondering with trade routes. I mean, if that's also a major part in all that, or this is something completely independent, or I have no fucking idea.
I've heard. I don't know entirely, but I've heard that it did have play some part in it as well.
Yeah,
diverting routes and things like that.
Well, Lydia's on this show. Did you spend much time in Rochester growing up? Because that's about an hour from Niagara.
Yeah, I would go there for hockey games.
Okay.
They have a minor league hockey team, but there was also a club, like a bar I used to go to. I can't remember what it was called. It's called the Garage Door, maybe. I don't know, but that was like early college and stuff. So
then the next question is, would you go up to Toronto a bunch?
Yeah, Toronto I would go up to a bunch too. That felt even like faster and crazier.
It's 3 million people, exactly. It's a major city.
I had a lot of relatives. I still do have relatives on the Canadian side of the falls as well. So,
my father was Canadian.
Oh, was he right over the border? Oh, Kitchener.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you play hockey?
We have a lot more in common, Rick, than I care to admit.
I guess
my father played hockey, not professionally.
Oh, really? Yeah. No, I played hockey. It's that area is really into hockey. So a lot of
they're really into
kids
hockey.
growing up. And so I'm into sports. I've always admired your White Sox hat, I have to say.
Oh, well, that's a different conversation for another time. But
I've definitely noted that you've worn it the last couple of times I've seen you, and I was like, that's a great hat.
Well, yeah, 76 to 80. It's specific. But did you go to Buffalo Bills games growing up?
Absolutely. It's that's part of the family. I mean, that's Buffalo 66 is not that far off from reality. And I still do. And it's so different being a fan of Buffalo sports, because it's so much more like family. There's something so different about it. Like you grow up and it's such a small area that either you or someone in your family or someone you knew has somehow worked for the Bills or worked in this for the Sabres.
So do you consider O.J. Simpson family?
It was tough. It was a tough time. It was a tough time. There was a lot of soul searching that we had to do, and are still doing.
Did you ever go to the House Guitars?
No, I did not.
Oh, well, there's a reason to go back to Rochester, I guess. I don't have time to go into the history of that, but we'll go back to that later.
Are you a fan of the band Talus?
Talus?
So Talus, I don't know if you know who they are, but that was
it sounds familiar.
Yeah, that was kind of like a, I wouldn't say full on glam metal, more like kind of meat and potatoes kind of glam metal, like Rust Belt glam metal. And it was the band that kind of didn't make it, but when those bands would come through, including like Van Halen, they would do a regional opening up. They're from Buffalo, and but they never really broke outside of that area. But the bass player, Billy Sheehan, was taken. He was noted. He was the bass player for David Lee Roth's solo act for the first couple albums. But they were kind of Buffalo legends in that kind of tight pants, guitar shredder.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know Buffalo had. Yeah, that's news to me. They didn't have much of a glam.
Well, it's Rust Belt glam.
It was more gloom.
yeah. They had the big hair. They had the big hair.
Very good, Rick. More gloom. Yeah.
they had the mascara and big hair and shredder.
I just gloomed during glam. It's true. But I did. I might have been the first gloom rocker. Before I turned to punch rock.
A gloom rocker. That's a good one.
Well, let me just ask you this. How did you hook up with Jeff Schneider to get this out through he's been putting out a lot of very interesting books on graphic novels, comic, cartoonish illustrations, other books. He's got something going there.
Oh, we met through Lisa Carver, actually. I've always wondered, do you know Lisa Carver?
No, I don't. I know who she is.
Yeah, okay. I think you'd either really like each other or really hate each other.
Doesn't matter about that at the moment. This book is published by Big Rose Publishing. That's Jeff Schneider from Arab on Radar. and who also writes and reads and does all kinds of things. So
Yeah, and I was really happy to have him publish, and it's been a dream to publish with him. He's like really
did you just contact him and
communicative
say, "Here's my latest joint," and he said, "Yeah"?
oh yeah, he's a great guy and really supportive. So this passage begins in a Tim Hortons. So I guess
Yes,
for anyone south of the Mason-Dixon line, the Tim Hortons is the Dunkin' Donuts of Canada.
Canada, yes.
Yeah. I stopped at Tim Hortons. It was a certain Timmy's I had recently read about, one where something terrible had occurred. A young woman, an employee, was set on fire by her ex-boyfriend by the dumpster pen behind the building. She had moved on, started dating someone else. He dumped a plastic bottle filled with gasoline over her head, pulled out a lighter. After the flames were doused by an employee who came outside with a bucket of water, the victim couldn't tell if she was still on fire or not. She survived with burns over 40% of her body. Some of the burns burrowed deep down to muscle, tendons, and bones. Fingers were burnt so badly they had to be amputated. He got life in prison. She lives behind a face that bears the reminder of a single violent moment so extreme she couldn't imagine it was possible, even as it was happening. I don't believe I would have pulled into this Tim Hortons if it wasn't for remembering about the tragedy that took place here. I didn't really want a donut or coffee. I was drawn to it out of morbidity more than anything else. I parked my car and walked around back. I wasn't expecting to see anything there, no scorched ground or pieces of charred flesh. This happened several months before, maybe even a year. I just needed to see the site of horror. I stood upon the exact same spot where it might have happened, between a dumpster and an L-shaped wooden partition. First, I closed my eyes to see if I could sense something different here, an energetic lingering. I pulled a hand from my pocket, raised it lazily, looking like a half-assed thereminist. I felt no immediate vibrations of any sort. The energy of such moments have to go somewhere, right? Suspended in that space, perhaps down into the ground, forming trauma landfills, a garbage dump of pain. Then again, the Earth has been around long enough that I'm sure something terrible has happened at every inhabitable coordinate. No matter where you are standing in an old rape, a murder, an attack, or torture. So there was no reason to think I would feel anything different here, other than through his freshness. Nevertheless, I got down on the ground and began arranging myself in freeze-frame poses, reenacting the attack in dramatic tableau vivants. Stills from a passion play in the parking lot, a solo performance. On my back, hands to face, one leg kicked up, body violently twisted. On my knees, reaching forward. Back on my feet, I focused on the air, gesturing to invisible counterparts. I began to speak, talking, taking on both roles, going over the scene, trying to sense what it was going through their minds in the moment leading up to the attack. Some lines were improvised, others remembered from the news stories. I said them quietly, though, screamed in a hushed play-acting whisper, so as not to draw attention to myself in the back parking lot. No matter what I tried, I continued to feel nothing. Or at least I didn't think I did. I guess I felt what I put into it. For a crime scene near a dumpster, it smelled pretty good in the back lot. Sweet and toasty.
Really beautiful.
It's a
Really
real
beautiful.
uplifting book.
Well, it's beautifully portrayed, that
Thank you.
garbage dump of desperation, misery, and ultimately survival.
Thank
That
you.
is Niagara.
Yes.
Or new book, which I really feel so close to, having lived close to it. And yeah, I love the revelations too about the family, and I mean, some of the motels, just the landscape that
Oh,
you're
God,
painting
yeah.
is not only about the historical. And basically, the book is about you. You have to write an article for a magazine that's paying you very little, so you're making the journey back to this place that nobody should walk amongst at this point. To visit a family you don't give a shit about and who has no idea about who you are. And it's also filled with a bit of hallucinatory abstractions of goblins. There was one thing that, when you were talking about a basement somewhere, which I do fetishize basements,
Mhm.
but I remember when my Sicilian grandmother died in bed next to me at the age of 6, the basement was where she often haunted me post mortem.
Oh,
And you have
yeah.
a creepy relationship with the basement. you're going down to on your visit to your family with the lights blinking on and off and just dark passages and the smell that hits you in the face, which a good
Yeah.
basement does.
Yeah, it's all the hauntings of childhood that when you revisit a place to just come back as if they had been there waiting for you all along.
Well, and smell is, one of the most, uh, what would the word be? It's one of the most prominent parts of what memory is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Our smell isn't obviously as powerful or sophisticated as like a dog or a bear's, but what is associated with memory is some other dimensional thing. It's kind of amazing. But not to digress.
Yeah, and I did see in Niagara Falls when I was there, I did see a bodega that was selling incense called Ghost Scent. So maybe so that seems like it relates here somehow.
is there a kind of long-lasting general smell to Niagara Falls that you can identify?
I was going to ask the same thing, Tim. Exactly.
Well, once you're at the falls,
Right.
it's powerful to all senses. You smell fresh water, you hear this
The
nature's
roar is unbelievable.
beautiful white noise you can ever imagine. I once parked my van as close as possible to sleep to that white noise because I'm a big white noise fan. And then you also feel it because the mist hits you.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like every sense it's got something for you. So there's the smell of that. But when you're walking around different parts of Niagara Falls, you're either smelling like Italian food or like that decaying wood, depending on what neighborhood you're in.
Oh, okay.
But
All
it's
right.
not like poverty porn like a lot of
pretty
places.
wholesome. Right.
Wait,
Yeah.
say that again, Rick.
I said it's
again.
not like poverty porn like a lot of places. I already mentioned that in the book. It's the eeriness is more about like the long stretches of nothing and not even like growth on the ground. It's just nothing.
Absence.
And as a kid,
Absence.
that gets into your head. Like it makes you think a little bit too much, more than you should as a child about nothingness. So that's
It is a place of absolute existential dread if one decides to go that path. And how could one not when such
if you're into
incredible,
it.
tremendous beauty is bookended against cancer causing toxic foreverness? Welcome to this world, my friend. Which side do you want to go to? The falls, or do you just want to fall into the dump site? Well, the book is called Niagara, New York by Ric Royer, published by Jeff Schneider at Pig Rose Publishing. Any last thoughts, Timothy Doll?
Well, I did ask early on, that latest Fast and the Furious, which I haven't seen and probably won't, taking place in Niagara Falls. What do you think of the Superman 2 scene in Niagara Falls?
That I can't believe you brought that up. I have an incredible fear of heights, and I have always brought that back to that scene in that movie. Because after that scene in the movie, I couldn't go to the brink of the falls and not think of me as a child also falling in without Superman there to save me. So I really remember that scene.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Cool. Well, Rick, what a pleasure. It was great talking with you the other night in Catskills. So
yeah, this was a pleasure too. I've listened to this podcast so much. I like this podcast so much. So to be on it is like I feel like I won some like radio call-in show. It's really great.
Well, you have.
Well, after about 220 whatever, I mean, the circle expands.
Yeah.
And again, we call it the connective tissue because
Uh-huh.
I don't know personally everybody that's been on the show, neither does Tim. I love when people recommend people to be on the show. I mean, that's how I've met a few people. And certainly, I mean, I appreciate writers. I mean, it's still literature is the priority in my life as far as what matters in art. So when I read a great book, I'm happy to put it on.
That's excellent.
And there we go.
Thank you so much. And I guess I'll see you lurking in the woods up here.
Oh, I'll be there as soon as everything is dead, which might not be too long in the future. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Ric Royer, Niagara, New York. Out now? Is it out now?
Out now.
Out now. Pig Rose Publishing. Get it online through Jeff Schneider. Thanks so much. See you soon, my friend.